This happened back in high school during the winter. I was walking back home from school listening to some music. Ahead of me, I noticed a black cat was just standing in the middle of the walkway. It had the prettiest blue eyes. I stopped for a moment to look at it. I hadn't seen it before, and it didn't have a collar but looked a little too clean to be a stray. I also noticed that the cat had a white spot around its left eye. It was strange that the cat was just outside all by itself. It was snowing heavily, and stray cats in my area would usually hide in local abandoned buildings for warmth. I felt bad for the poor thing, but I knew I couldn't take it home. I eventually started walking away when I heard the cat meowing. It was very loud and almost aggressive. I felt a little unsettled and started walking faster. I figured it was just very hungry and decided that if I saw it the next day, I'd give it some food. I kept walking home, and at a certain point, I was struck with a very uneasy feeling. I took out my earbuds and looked around. That's when I saw a man. He was very tall and skinny, had shaggy hair, and was wearing a black trench coat. I couldn't make out any of his facial features because of the heavy snow. He was just standing there in the middle of the road. Something felt very off, but I continued walking, this time without music, just to be more wary of my surroundings. That's when I heard heavy footsteps, like someone was quickly approaching me. I turned around and saw the man sprinting towards me. I felt horrified and started running away since the guy was a lot taller and probably more athletic than out-of-shape high school me. He caught up to me quickly. I felt my heart beating in my throat. I was horrified that he might get to me at any moment, and who knows what he'd do then. My fears came true when I felt a hand grab me by my shoulder. I tried to shake it off, but the grip was way too strong. When I looked back at him, the first thing I noticed was his eyes. They were a very deep shade of blue. I also saw that he had a white spot around his left eye that looked like it could be from vitiligo. It was exactly like that cat that I had seen earlier. He didn't look homeless. He actually had a very clean face. His expression was just blank. He didn't look angry, happy, sad, nothing. Just empty blue eyes staring at me. He didn't take out a knife or attack me in any way, just held my arm really tight. I don't know how, but I managed to gain the strength to escape his grasp and run away. I eventually managed to get home. Homeless people and drug addicts walking around the street wasn't an uncommon occurrence where I lived. For some reason, that man was just different. I don't believe in things like mythical creatures, but the similarities were just too uncanny. I don't know if it was a shapeshifter, a skinwalker, or whatever else, but to this day, I firmly believe that what I saw that day wasn't a normal human. My name is Raj. I'm a college student from India, and this happened to me in 2022. It was just after the COVID lockdown had been lifted in my country and things were almost back to normal. The COVID days really made me miserable and dull because I wasn't able to enjoy the fresh air outside. So after the lockdown was finally lifted, I was really happy and excited to go outside again. Also, one of the other reasons was that I was finally going to see my girlfriend after so long. It was a normal afternoon, and my girlfriend and I decided to go for a walk. My mom was still very concerned as the pandemic hadn't completely ended, so she got mad when I told her that I was going out. Being a stubborn teenager back then, I didn't listen to her and went out anyway. My girlfriend's house was a few kilometers away, and I didn't have a bike or car, so I had to take an auto rickshaw to her home. I waited for a rickshaw, but most rickshaws were already filled with passengers, so I waited a bit longer when I saw a rickshaw coming from a distance. I called for it, assuming it had no passengers. The rickshaw man saw me and stopped right beside me. Then I saw that the rickshaw already had a passenger. I saw the passenger sitting in the back seat. He was an old man, probably in his late 60s, slightly dark-skinned, and was intently staring at me with wide eyes. I looked at the driver in confusion. The driver asked me to go ahead and get in and sit while he dropped the other passenger at the nearby building. He told me the building's name. I knew where it was, and it was actually just around the corner, so I decided to get on. As I was getting on, I saw the passenger who was sitting on the far side of the seat move towards me, and he grabbed my arms. He had a creepy smile on his face and was asking me politely to get on the rickshaw. I immediately pulled my arms away and asked the man to move away. I was getting really creepy vibes from the man and the rickshaw, but I wanted to get to my girlfriend's house fast, so I got on. As the rickshaw started moving, the man slowly moved closer to me and grabbed my arms again. He then started touching my arms with his other hand. While he was doing this, he was trying to have a friendly conversation with me like, "What's your name? Where do you live? Where are you going?" I was getting really disturbed by his behavior. I tried to push him away, but he was almost clinging on to me. Then I decided to brush it off as he was going to get off soon anyway, so I looked outside and then I realized that the rickshaw drove past the building the driver was talking about. At that moment, I got really scared. Then suddenly, I could feel the man's hand slowly starting to touch my body again. Out of reflex, I pushed the man away and shouted at the driver to stop the rickshaw. He stopped immediately and I got off without even looking back. My heart was beating out of my chest and I couldn't say or do anything besides get away. I stood still for a moment to catch my breath and then I saw the rickshaw drive away. I felt relieved and started to walk back home. A few days later, my father was reading a news article which said that a young boy had been murdered by two men in our town. One of them was an auto rickshaw driver and the other one was an escaped prison convict. Hearing the news, I started remembering that moment again. What would have happened to me if I hadn't gotten off the rickshaw when I did? Would I still be alive?
Some of the stories I've heard recently remind me of something that happened to me when I was a kid. I lived in Finland. I was a 14-year-old girl with blonde hair and green eyes. I loved nature and playing with my friends in nature. I was born in the Lapland side of Finland, covered in spruce trees and bogs. Our last house was a cabin in the woods. We had a 15-minute walk to school, as the small town we lived in was scattered around the forest. I had a few friends, such as my little brother, Ellen, and Miko. It was a beautiful area, although, when it was winter, it was the most beautiful, with snow piling on top of spruce branches and the Eurasian bullfinch singing happily. Everything was normal, all completely normal. Until one Monday morning. I was getting ready to go to school, taking my red backpack with me. I scurried off, leaving my brother home since he was a few years younger, meaning his school would start later. The walk to school would usually be 25 minutes, but because I know a shortcut through the forest, it only took 15 minutes. The forest that I've always passed through has been joked about by people that trolls live there. In childhood stories, such as, "The gnomes waiting for Christmas live under tree trunks, go see if you can find a small door," made the trip even more fun. The forest I passed through is very familiar. I could go through it with a blindfold. The birds singing in mid-May as the sun pierces through the leaves of the trees made it more aesthetic. I loved the sounds of forest, and I would always listen as I walked. But this day, as I walked deeper into the forest, the sounds became distinct and less familiar to me. I was worried but kept going on. I would soon reach my school, and I knew I could go on about my day once I got there. I heard something dropped from my backpack and turned to look back. And funny enough, it was my falcon keychain that I got from the zoo. I picked it up and turned back around and I wasn't in the same forest anymore. The sounds of the wind, the birds singing, even my footsteps had gone silent. I looked around frantically as I did not recognize where I was. There were no more paths, and if I saw correctly, there were birch trees, which could not possibly be in the area where I lived. I felt as though the sky was reflected upon the earth below me, and the sky was looming over me as though it was angry. I was frightened. At some point, I started running, looking around for landmarks, and a few tears even running down my cheek. I felt as though someone or something was chasing me, but I couldn't see anything. I kept running when my foot tripped over a tree root, and in that moment, all the sounds came back. I looked back, and there was the path I originally started on my trip. I was petrified. I knew what I saw and felt just moments earlier. I stood still for a few moments trying to understand what had happened. I was afraid that if I continued my trip, the same occurrence would repeat, so I took off back home. When I frantically opened the door and ran to hug my mom, she immediately knew something was off. She asked me, worried, why I was not at school and why I was panicking. I told her what had happened, and her face twisted in fear as I described it. But a second later, she looked relieved. She simply sat me down and told me, "You entered the forest blanket." I was afraid and confused. There was an old folk story of this occurrence. It's said that once you step into the forest's blanket, you are in the realm of the trolls. And there, you are an unwelcome guest. People who escape the blanket are considered lucky because if you stay there too long, you will be chased by the forest people. Those who get chased are souls who never got away, as I did. My face went white. So that was the pressure I felt when I was running, I thought to myself. Needless to say, I could not go through forests for a while. But after a year, I was confident enough to go again, since my grandmother told me that it would not happen again. She told me that the souls of the forest blanket could not bear to see a lucky survivor. They instead would give good luck to me as a trophy for doing something they could not survive. I was a really brave kid. I was not scared of the dark, monsters, or ghosts. In fact, I even really liked listening to scary stories as a kid. I was around the age of 4 or 5 when this incident took place. We are a family of 4. Me, my mom, my dad, and my brother. And we live in an apartment. My brother and I used to share a room as kids, and our room had a balcony where my mom hung out clothes to dry. One night, my mother had gone to take a shower, and my dad and my brother had gone out somewhere. I was just relaxing on the couch when I heard my mom come out of the bathroom. She went to my room so she could take some dried clothes from the balcony to wear. I was right beside her, riding my tricycle on the balcony. Since we lived on the second floor, there was no way anyone can enter the balcony. My mom left the room, and I was still there on the balcony riding my tricycle. Minutes passed, and I became bored, so I decided to leave my tricycle. Right as I was about to step off of the tricycle, something grabbed my hand, something large. It was all gray and faceless. It looked like a silhouette of a person wearing an oversized hoodie. It just stood there holding my hand. I was shocked. I did not say a word. All I did was try to escape it. I tried to pull myself away from it, but it was not letting go. After a few minutes of struggling, it let go and disappeared. Poof, gone. I don't remember what happened after that. I'm 15 now and still live in the same house. No one believes me when I tell them this story. Everyone says it was just a dream, but I don't believe them. I know I felt its hand on me. Two years ago, I lived on a crescent road. My suburb was honestly fairly sketchy, and there was crime happening every now and then. Like someone a few houses away from me had been murdered by his brother. But I won't go into that, considering I don't know much of what happened. Anyway, I'd never been that fearful of where I lived, despite all of the things happening. My road was very quiet all the time. You wouldn't really see people out, and the houses were very close to one another, enough so that you can hear any yelling from the neighbors. My room had a window that directly peered into the backyard, and there was a gate at the end of the pathway. But our backyard gate didn't have a lock on it, as it had been broken, and we laid bricks along the gap under the gate, as we had a rabbit that could escape through it. Anyway, I usually fall asleep after 11:30 p.m. at the earliest, but on this particular night, 2 days before my birthday, I happened to drift off around 10. My mom slept with me at the time, as we didn't have many rooms. Not too long into our sleep, we were both awakened by a noise. My mom had been significantly more alert than me and asked me, "Did you hear that?" I agreed, but said that it was most likely a cat because our street was infested with them, and they'd always make noise at night, so I went back to sleep. A few minutes later, I woke up to loud screaming from my mom and her ushering me to leave the room as she yelled "robber" so that my dad would wake up, as he slept in the room farthest away from us. Then, my mom explained what had happened. She said that after I had gone to sleep, she got up on her elbows to look out the window as she thought she could hear footsteps. Then, to her horror, there was a man walking into the backyard who hadn't noticed her yet. But since our lamp was on, he looked into the window and saw my mom. My mom froze as he looked at her, and he froze too, as if he hadn't expected to see anyone. While watching him, my mom went to tap me to wake me up, and as she did that, he gestured to her to not say anything, and that is what got her to scream. My dad didn't initially believe her until he saw the backyard gate was open, meaning that the sound that had woken us up was the scraping of the bricks on the concrete. We called the police, and they didn't find anything, and from that night on, we always closed the shutter blinds. The scariest part was that the man could have easily gotten into my room, as the window was massive, and there was only a flimsy net between the inside and the outside. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if my mom hadn't seen him and screamed.
My name is Amog. This happened to me when I was 10 years old. It was the month of October, and I was on my Dussehra holidays. I had a week's holiday, and we had gone to our hometown. Our village is located in a very rural part of India. The nearest town is 30 minutes away, and there is nothing but wilderness in the area. This story is what happened to me on one of the days I was staying in the village. We had a small house in the village, and one evening it was late and there was no milk or curd left for dinner. Our uncle asked me to get the items from the shop nearby. I called my younger brother, who is 1 year younger than me, to come with me to get the items. We cycled our way to the shop and got the milk and curd my uncle asked me to get. We were cycling back to our house, but suddenly I heard a prayer called namaz, which is usually followed by Muslims. The situation weirded me out, as namaz is usually done during the evening at around 5, but it was around 8 at night. The other thing was that the mosque was in ruins. Out of curiosity, I, as a big brother, asked my younger brother to accompany me and see what was going on in the mosque. What I saw still shocks me to this day. In the middle, I saw a satanic pentagram and people with their eyes gouged out and their bodies upside down. Suddenly, one woman saw me and screamed at the top of her lungs. Her voice was unlike anything I'd heard. It was a mix of a goat and a demon. She screamed out loudly,
"My sons, come here,
in a very disturbing way. We rushed out of the mosque and cycled as fast as we could back to our house. When I rushed inside after throwing my bicycle down, my uncle asked me what happened. I explained everything to him and he was petrified. He told me what we had seen was not a vision and was a true story. He explained that a lady had recently died after her sons had died. After that, I never went back to the village. I'm 20 years old now and pursuing medicine along with my brother, and that situation still haunts me to this day. What would have happened to my brother and me if we hadn't run away from that place?
So just to fill you in, this incident happened just a few days ago. I live in a small village in the Balkans, and I am 15 years old, around 5'8" and 60 kilograms. Keep in mind that after 5 p.m., it gets pretty dark here. Now back to the story. A few days ago, my dog was injured. She was bitten by another dog, so I felt the need to go to the church. After I finished school and homework, around 6 p.m., I got ready and left to go to the church. Now, most churches don't allow jeans or pants when you go for prayer. But because I am Orthodox, I try to keep the tradition as much as possible. So I wore a long black skirt, a black shirt, and a carpetin, a vest, over my shoulders and boots. As I walked into the church, I had an odd feeling, but brushed it off. When I was outside of the church, I saw a guy who looked to be around his mid-40s. He was wearing a black hoodie and holding a red flower, probably a rose. He was moving in such a way that I thought he was dancing. He started smelling the rose and looking at the sky. I felt kind of creeped out at the moment, but I just thought that he was drunk or something like that. When he noticed me, he stopped dancing and smelling the flower. He looked at me smiling, but he had an uncomfortable smile. It seemed like he was scared of something, but I couldn't figure out what. As I finished my prayer and was leaving the church, I saw him trying to harm a girl, and as he was wrestling with her, he broke her arm. I ran up to him and punched him, and he immediately started crying and begging me not to hurt him. I punched him one more time, and he fainted. I called the police and the ambulance, and once they arrived, they arrested the man. The next day, I learned from my grandma that the girl was going home after her final test for her English private lessons. I was stunned, but also confused about why he didn't harm me because he saw me first. Why didn't he attack me? I couldn't sleep that night, so I promised myself to go to the church again the next day to pray for that girl. When I woke up, I saw a grandma inside my house talking with my mother. As usual, I greeted her and smiled at her, but she got down on her knees and she told me that she saw me at the church the other day. She told me that I had white wings on my back and my eyes had become white as I was punching this guy. I was stunned. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to say. After the incident, I went to the priest and he told me that I had a spirit following me and protecting me. I just wonder what would have happened if that thing hadn't protected me.
I would like to share a summer camp story with you. This happened when I was 11, but I'm a girl turning 14 this weekend. Remember that the majority of the cabins were situated behind a river. So I was hoping to attend a summer camp that lasted overnight. I had no idea that it would result in the scariest thing that would give me nightmares for the rest of my life. Everything was usual on the first day. We lit a fire and danced around it. Even though it was too bright to start a fire, I had a great time. After the fire, all of the cabin members gathered for a cabin hangout that lasted until approximately 11 o'clock at night. The cabin leaders remained in the middle of the area, seated on a small park bench. We sang and danced around, having a great time. After the cabin hangout, the CLs, cabin leaders, retired to bed, and I immediately followed suit. It should be noted that due to their age, the cottages lacked insulation, plasterboard, and electricity. I was up quite late. Although I didn't know the exact hour, it was probably between 1 and 12. The scene I witnessed through the window between the two bunk beds there will haunt me for the rest of my life. There was a black figure. I kept looking out the window at the figure, trying to figure out what it was. After a while, I concluded that it was one of the boys from the other cabins playing a prank on us, so I ignored it and went to sleep. Up until Thursday night, everything was how it should be. I was just lying on my bed when one of the kids started having breathing difficulties. I think she was around 10 or 9. We'll refer to her as Demi. To get her to the nurse's cabin, we needed 2 CLs, which still seemed odd to me. A previous visitor, a girl, mentioned that Thursday night was when something happened every year she had been here. Although it's off topic, we have a buddy system where you have to have a buddy with you anywhere you go, away from the present activity. A girl had to use the loo and dragged another female with her. Once they were gone, I got up to watch the CLs conversing from the window beside my bed. About 2 minutes later, I watched the girls dash to the cabin at top speed. Not even did they remove their shoes before bursting and slamming the door. When I approached the girls and asked them why they had run in so quickly, they yelled in fear, "We saw something by the river." I asked one of the scared girls to accompany me since I was inquisitive and wanted to see for myself. I'll refer to her as Sam. We lied to the CLs that I had to urinate. I hurried over to use the loo, and then we walked slowly back, looking down at the river, till Sam bolted forward, leaving me behind. Perplexed, I turned to see where she was focusing. There was a black figure that I noticed motionless. When we had gone a sufficient distance, we paused to catch our breath, and I asked her, "The eerie ghost?" "Way before this place was a camp," she added, glancing at me. "Someone had lost their life in the water." In a hurry, I started to walk back while Sam leaned over my shoulder to accompany me. I had trouble sleeping that night, and I also had trouble getting to Friday. Hi, my name is Jinro Anthony, and I work as a customer care technical representative at a well-known company here in the Philippines. For a while, I had been working night shifts every day from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. Sometimes I got so bored and burnt out since I was just repeating the same routines every day, like work, go home, eat and rest, and work again. But then one day, an unexpected event occurred. I still clearly remember it all. The creepiest thing that ever happened to me happened that night. It was October 28th and Halloween was just around the corner. As our teammates were in a hurry to fix the Halloween decorations on the production floor, we were telling each other creepy and horror stories, especially ghost stories that happen at work. One of the stories I heard was about the famous ghost that haunts all call center companies. June, the boy who died and haunts call center agents who are alone at night. He would appear in the sleeping quarters, on the production floor, and sometimes would mess with the headsets. You'll hear a little kid whispering in your ears. But that was a repeated story and one that I knew already. Then one of our teammates, who was a tenured agent nicknamed Jenny, told us a story about the lady in white who would appear in the building we were working in. Jenny told us that on the 21st floor, which is the top floor of the building, there is a pale female ghost that will appear from 3 a.m. to 3:05 a.m. Yep, she will appear for 5 minutes and will let you see her on the opposite far side of the station when you are sitting alone. It was said that when you're sitting on the south side of the production floor, she will appear on the far north side of it, and she will just stand still and look at the window. She has pale skin and wears a white dress. They said that when you see the lady looking at the window, don't make any sounds. Be silent and don't let her see you looking at her, and don't let her notice you there. Jenny said that there was a previous employee who saw the ghost and resigned quickly after that, but none of us believed it since we had not yet encountered the lady. Then one day, to be specific, it was November 6th, 2022, All of my teammates had filed for early out and it was approved. I didn't because I needed to do overtime because I was paying a lot of bills at that time. I couldn't chill for even a moment or relax. Our hours that day were from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., but all my teammates left at 1 a.m. and I was left alone. It was actually Sunday, and since most employees are off on weekends, my teammates and I were the only people in the entire building. At exactly 2 a.m., I remembered the story that Jenny told me. I thought to myself, what a great story. I don't actually believe in ghosts or stuff like that, but I was actually fascinated by it. And in fact, I've been watching horror movies, series, and mysteries on Netflix and YouTube. 3 a.m. It was my lunchtime from 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. I went outside our 18th production floor and went to the free coffee vending machine outside. I refilled my water bottle, then drank from it and ate my steamed dumplings. It was getting very cold, so I put on my black hooded jacket. Then, while eating alone in the kitchen area, I thought of going to the 21st floor alone to check if the story about the pale ghost was real. So I went up to the 21st floor and sat on the south side of the production floor. I sat on a nearby chair and waited for the lady. It was cold and quiet, so I pulled the jacket hood over my head and put in my headphones to listen to music. It was 3:50, so I only had 10 minutes left on my lunch break. I decided to wait for a little bit longer, and then at exactly 3:55, I was scrolling on Facebook, listening to one of Eminem's songs. He was my favorite rapper, by the way. And as I was scrolling, my screen froze and there was static in my AirPods. I slowly raised my head towards the far north side of the floor, and I could see the silhouette of a person standing there. I couldn't see the person clearly, but I was shocked to find out or to realize that I was not alone. But I thought I couldn't be, as it was a Sunday when no one worked. I realized that maybe I'm not the only one who needs to take overtime. But then, I saw her dress. It was a white dress and she was looking out the window. I remembered the story again and my eyes widened as the realization that it was the actual ghost sunk in. I swallowed nervously and carefully observed the ghost. Suddenly, my AirPods turned off and Bluetooth disconnected, so the music started playing loudly from my phone. I was able to turn it off really quickly this time, but I got scared and nervous. It all happened so fast that I barely processed what happened. Then suddenly, slowly, the ghost's head started turning in my direction. I was scared to death, so I kept quiet and crawled on the floor towards the exit. She did not see me, and I was able to get to the elevator. I pressed the button and waited, and it opened finally. There was a long hallway to get to the elevator, and when I stepped inside the elevator, I saw the woman standing at the end of the hallway, staring directly at me. I pressed the button to close the elevator door, but then she started crawling towards me. It was slow at first, then it was faster and faster, and she was almost up close to me, and the elevator door closed just in time. The elevator arrived at the ground floor and I ran outside to the parking lot and drove away. As I was running to the car and driving away, I looked up and saw the ghost smiling and waving at me from the 21st floor. I quit and resigned from my position that day and never went back there again. It gave me nightmares for weeks, and it was a moment I will never forget for the rest of my life. To this day, I still don't know what happened to that lady, why she wore a white dress, or what would have happened to me if she reached me in the elevator.